All right. Thank you for attending today. My name is Ken Robertson, and I work as an identity architect for General Electric in Richmond, Virginia. So many years ago, I was a Unix system administrator for an automotive company. And being a sysadmin was a pretty challenging job. Most of the challenges are around security, middleware, access management. And at the time, I thought that I knew quite a bit about security. I understood how to encrypt data. I understood how to harden my servers. I understood how the sudoers file worked and things like that. But it turns out there was a pretty big gap that I was missing that I didn't quite understand. And eventually I discovered the gap was me, the Unix sysadmin, and all my fellow sysadmins. Because who was watching the watchmen? And it turns out there was no one. So we secured all kinds of things, but we have very little controls on what we could do. And so it turns out that system administrators are a pretty big risk, and we needed a way to manage that. So, but first of all, let me tell you a little bit about sysadmins. First of all, they really love to automate things, right? And so with automation, you need credentials. You need access to the things that you're going to access. And if a sysadmin has to do anything twice, they're going to write a script to do it, which was fine with me. I love programming. So I would easily spend an hour writing a program to solve a 10-minute problem. But you can always reuse that code some other time. So here's the thing. Think about it. You've got administrators that are typically overprivileged in your environment. They have access to all kinds of things. Credentials accumulate as you've been in the role for a while. There's very few jobs that expose you to as many things as being a system administrator. So you get access to networking, operating systems. And this is a big problem. This is a big risk for the company. And so this is how I got started in privileged access management, was trying to tackle that problem and understand what I could do about it. It turned out that there was many people actually that had similar problems trying to solve it also. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is privileged access management. There we go. Okay, and just I'll refer to privileged access management as PAM for the rest of the presentation, just because it's easier to roll off the tongue. And I figured this talk would appeal to people that didn't already have a PAM program in their environment. We're just getting started out. And so most of the stuff that I'll talk about is about getting started with your PAM program. But I understand there's going to be some people in the audience also that are experienced PAM administrators. They already have some ideas, and maybe some of these tools will help them with some of their research. But if you don't have a PAM program, I definitely recommend getting one started today. No matter what size company you're coming from, there's privileged credentials that you need to protect. And if you have time, up in the expo hall, there's some vendors up there. They're identity geeks just like us, and they will love to talk to you about PAM. Just tell them you're not ready to spend any money, and that way they don't bug you too much. All right. Oh, there it goes. I just have to push the button harder. Okay. So I put this slide in here also, so people didn't expect that they can go back to their manager and say, hey, this is going to be easy. It's not going to cost anything, right? So there's a saying that goes, open source is only free if your time has no value. And that's the truth, because a lot of this stuff takes time to research. You don't have a vendor to lean on in a lot of cases. And so you do have to commit some time into getting your open source tools up and running. Now, the good thing, though, is open source is going to be the future of business. There are more companies that allow their employees to use open source tools in their environment, more so than ever before. And there's more companies that are actually contributing to open source tools and programs. So, and people often wonder, what do those businesses actually get out of providing open source tools? It's not always a monetary benefit, right? It could be that they're using it to influence decisions on products that you might have, that they might offer for sale. It might be as a marketing tool. It might be to recruit top talent to work within their company. So there's lots of reasons why they would offer open source tools. All right, here I've got a picture of an identity administrator, and he's provisioning an API key there, it looks like. All right, so a quick PAM 101. I kind of covered some of the things in my intro, but it's really about, security is defense in depth, right? And PAM programs have many layers, like ogres and onions, right? And so the more mature your program is, the more layers you're going to have, or the more layers you'll be able to implement. But at a really high level, it's really about enforcing the least privilege principle across your privileged accounts, preferably through a centralized tool that provides some type of logging for auditing. So here's some of the typical layers that you would see in an enterprise PAM program. The first one there, shared account password management. That's what most people think about. That's your password vaulting. That's where you're going to have policies on how you're going to control your credentials and who has access to them. The second one there, privileged session management, is about recording the actions that the administrator is taking on your endpoint devices. But one of the interesting aspects of the session management is often you can inject credentials into that session so that the administrator doesn't have to see any passwords. So it really helps to drive adoption of your PAM program. The third one there, the application credentials. Applications have access to all kinds of things, APIs, database connections. It's very important to control those accounts. But when you talk to the application administration team, the first thing they're going to say is, hey, I can't change that password. It's going to break my application, right? And then you find out that the application's been running for 3 years. They've never changed any of the passwords. People have left the company. They know what the passwords are. And it's really a risk for you, right? So, and then another good one that I heard is when they tell you that, hey, we use the same password in our dev environment as we do in production, because then we can easily move our code back and forth. I'm like, oh man, what a mess. So, the rest of these here, you start getting into some more advanced topics that we won't have time to cover today. And they're also things that are a little more difficult to cover with open source tools. So I'll save you a little bit of time. If you're looking for a complete PAM toolkit, you're not going to find one. And I've talked to other experts in the environment. I've searched through a lot of pet projects out on GitHub. There isn't anything out there that covers the full list of things that I just mentioned. So you got to kind of pick some ones to focus on. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session here. Okay, so I've got some time left here. I just told you that you're not going to find any complete open source tools. So the answer here is what can we do? I just mentioned that we can start to assemble a PAM toolkit out of various components that are available from different vendors or from different programs. So let's take a look here. All right, so first thing to focus on is to kind of get an understanding of your environment. What are the risks? What are you trying to mitigate? Are you just simply looking to vault your passwords? Are you looking to provide some way to apply policies on those passwords, some identity governance maybe. Are you just trying to centralize accounts in a place? So by understanding which risks you're trying to mitigate will help you focus on which tools that you might want to try to implement. Some of the organizations, they really want to try to do everything, right? And they say, because all those things I just mentioned are all risks, right? And everyone says, well, we want everything. But in reality, you kind of have to break these things down into smaller pieces to move the ball forward. And so we've got a few areas here that we're going to focus on and we'll talk about now. All right, so account discovery. Here's a good place to start. If you don't do anything else that I talk about today and you don't have a PAM program, at least go and do this. Think about it. If you don't know where all your privileged accounts are at or who has access to them, then none of these tools are going to help you, right? So you need to get a good inventory of your environment. So new privileged accounts are being created all the time, especially in larger organizations. There's different teams that are building out certain things, and you need to get ahead of that. So some things that you can use here to actually do the discovery. I mentioned write your own. So, a lot of these privileged accounts are in your Active Directory, they're in your LDAP. You have directories where you can go ahead and grab these accounts out of the inventory. Right, so write yourself a PowerShell script or a Bash script, and you can grab that information. And you can use a tool like Nmap or something to go out and look for devices. So those are some options there for the write your own. I also mentioned that a lot of these PAM vendors actually have free tools. This is one of their sales tactics is to do an inventory of your environment so you can see how bad off you are to start with. But these are free tools that they have available, and they're real easy to find, so just go out and search for them. But you can use that to baseline to see where you're starting. Maybe you can use it to actually validate some of the stuff in the scripts that you wrote, or you can just use them, right? The important part here is don't get discouraged. This is a tough task. This is, and the larger your organization is, the more difficult it becomes. So, even mature programs struggle with this. So, this slide is, there's something missing on this slide actually. So, I actually had on here consider. So I'll have to get an updated deck available for you guys. But I have considered there's a product called Open Audit, so Open-Audit, and so it's an application that's it's from a vendor named Opmantech, and you can use it to scan your network devices and accounts. It's a product that's written entirely in scripting languages, so it's PHP and Bash. And you could use that as an open source tool to go through your environment. And then one other one that I want to mention is if you're a Chef environment and you use Chef quite a bit, Chef has a tool called OHI, and it's for doing fingerprints of your servers. But one of the things that it can do is it can also look at any local accounts that might be on that server, and Chef makes it real easy for you to aggregate that. All right, this one looks good. Access management. So, human machines applications, all these different types of entities in your environment have access to credentials. And, this is some place that you might actually get, more or less a free pass in your environment, because you probably have an IDM tool in your already in place that you could leverage for this. But if you don't have an IDM tool, you can use things like your Active Directory to manage groups. Same thing with LDAP, and you can manage user lifecycle through those tools. But there's a few products here that I mentioned that you may want to consider. And the first two are actually supported by Red Hat. And the first one, Keycloak, is a combination SSO and identity manager. And it feeds up to Red Hat's, it's Red Hat's SSO tool is what it actually feeds up to. The second one, the free IPA, is actually probably a better choice if you strictly want an IDM tool. And IPA there stands for Identity Policy and Audit. And then the third one I've got mentioned there is SoftID. It's from a smaller company in Europe, but they've got excellent documentation, and it's pretty easy to set up. All right, so audit and monitoring. So this is another place where I think a lot of companies, you might get a free pass because you probably already have some type of SIM tool in your environment. But if you didn't, I've got some suggestions here of things that you can take a look at. And I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, the reason why you want to do this is to be able to verify who's using your accounts, look for access to servers that didn't go through your credential management system, just so you can keep track of any possible gaps that you might have. And yeah, this is a older slide, so I apologize for that. But I had 3 things on there. So the one that's missing is actually OSSec, and you might recognize that. It's a intrusion detection system. It's been around for a long time. It's really good for aggregating logs, and it's also good for identifying misuse of accounts. The other 2 there, I'll do the bottom one first. SIMmonster, that is that they have a it's a starter, kind of a starter tool for a small business. It's actually sold by a company. They sell an enterprise version also. And the top one, OSSIM, that's supported through Alien Vault. So Alien Vault sells a commercial version of that product. Okay, so here, finally, we're getting down to some secret store. And so there's a few options here, but for this presentation, I focused on a couple of secret stores that had really good documentation, really good user community. Also had, these are things that I thought a system administrator could stand up in a reasonable amount of time. So both of these tools, like I said, they have excellent online documentation, self-help videos, and some training stuff. There's one on here that I didn't mention, and I didn't put it on the slide, but I talked to a couple professionals that I showed this deck to beforehand, and they asked me why didn't I include Bless from Netflix. And I thought about it for a while, but Bless it's used for securing their SSH connections, and it uses a Bastion host with short-lived certificates. And it's actually a really great product, but it's you have to be in AWS, and so it doesn't have the flexibility to store all kinds of secrets that you might have in an enterprise. So that's why I didn't include it, but I think if you're all in AWS and you're looking for SSH management, it'd be a really good tool to consider. Okay, so I talked about a couple products there, but I wanted to get into, I still have 6 minutes left. I want to get a little bit more into some of the capabilities of the Vault, but really I don't have a lot of time to get into details, so I apologize for that, but we'll touch on some of the highlights for these products and show you a little bit of their features. All right. All right, here we go. So again, they're not in any order. They're in alphabetical order actually, and so not of any order of preference. And I know typically in Identiverse, we don't talk a lot about the vendors, and I do have the vendor's name up here, but I'm not really, I'm not here to promote them. I'm just talking about this is their open source product. So a little bit about Conjur. It was founded in 2011. CyberArk purchased it in May of 2017. And then 4 months later, they made the open source version of it available. And so some of the use cases, typical use cases for Conjur are securing your CI/CD pipeline, SSH keys, of course. It works really well with containers. And one of the things that's not on the slide that I wanted to mention is it gives you the ability to centralize your secrets management. A lot of tools that are out there right now, they'll have secret management that are, so take Chef for instance, they've got a secret manager for them, and so does Ansible. But this gives you the ability to centralize that. All those tools can still call this, and so that gives you a better way to keep track of everything. I just wanted to mention that, so the URL there to get started, it's real easy to go out and do some tests yourself. You can go to that URL, you download a Docker container. They've got some training materials there. I mean, you could be up and storing secrets in a matter of minutes. So definitely go out and take a look and play around with it a little bit. Okay, HashiCorp Vault. So it has a lot of similarities to Conjur, but in the way that it does things is a little bit different. A couple of the things that I mentioned here is the plugin secret engines. So the way they manage secrets is they'll have a secret engine that does key value stores, and they've got a secret engine that does AWS API connections, and one for databases. So basically, depending on what kind of credentials that you're going to save there, you've got these different secret engines that you can add. Again, there's a learn.hashicorp.com. There's a great place to go get some training. You download a binary. They got binaries for Mac, Windows, Linux. They even had Solaris on there. They've got excellent tutorials, and they actually get into some advanced topics like encryption and clustering. So I was really impressed by both of these products, actually, on how well their documentation was. But if you think about it, since these products actually, both of these companies sell a commercial version of the product, they actually do put a lot of time in the documentation, which will help you get things up and running pretty quickly. All right, I left this slide in as an honorable mention. So this was something that the programmer in me really wanted to get working. And I'll just tell you, I failed at it. The multi-user part here is the really difficult thing to solve, because KeePass doesn't have any type of multi-feature or multi-user features built into it. I mean, if you go out to their website, they'll talk about, hey, you can use your file system permissions, and you can make it read-only for these people, and only give these people access to write to the database. And that's not going to be the kind of accountability that you need in your PAM program. And so I played around with this for a while, trying to figure out a good way to make it work, and I just couldn't do it. But I left this slide in here because I'm hoping someday someone might find this and then figure it out, and then they'll find my name on there, and they'll contact me and tell me how they did it. All right, so, and I got a minute left. I'm right on time. So kind of to summarize where I'm at, so as you start your journey to build your PAM toolkit, you just really need to understand your organization's needs and risks. So, and then you're going to take the time to assemble this yourself. But at a minimum, I'd say two things that you really need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, account discovery, and then the password vaulting, and that's at a minimum where you need to go. And so I guess the key takeaway here is to get started today, and don't be afraid to think out of the box. So that's it. Thanks.
All right, I think we have time for one quick question.
Good question. If not, I can be out in the hall, take questions there.
Very good. Thank you, Ken.
All right. Thank you.